This is WVON Talks, a collection of Chicago Black Star Power. It's where the brightest share how they turned their obstacles into opportunities. This is where Black excellence lives. WVON Talks starts now.
My name is Xavier Ramey. Very, very proud to be here. I'm proud to always answer the call from WVON to be a part of WVON Talks. It's an incredible honor to be able to tell my story in just in a little bit of time. I hope that you walk away from this understanding not just like who I am, but more so what that means for who you could potentially be. So I'm a kid from the west side of Chicago, west side, best side, love it like nothing else, from K-Town. Grew up there to the son of Paul and Arita Ramey. I have 4 brothers. All of them are incredible, but unfortunately all are shorter than me, so it is what it is. They didn't luck out like that. I enjoy life. I enjoy relishing life. I enjoy analyzing and examining what life could be. At its core, I think if you ask folks like, what do I do for a living? They'll say I run Justice Informed, a social impact consulting firm that's based in the city of Chicago, though we work nationally and now increasingly globally. If you ask me, what do? I like to imagine. I like to imagine what life could be if we were leading our lives through the lens of our ambitions rather than our fears. I think about every single day. Every day I consider, what is this breath supposed to bring today? What is this time supposed to be spent doing? And I commit my day to that. Nowadays, what that means is I'm the proud owner of a startup entrepreneurship organization. It's a hard thing to start a business. It's a harder thing to start a business in the city of Chicago. One of the things that I thought about when I first started was whether we would raise money, whether we would go in and take on some debt to start the company. And I made a split decision to go out and actually see if the value proposition for justice, for equity, was something that could actually support the lives of people like myself, but also our growing staff at Justice Informed. Started with a $215 contract, an iPad, and the back of my car. And we've grown that now into $1 million company with several staff to do what I started this to all do, which was to change the face of expertise. The thing about consulting, which is the core of the work that we do, the thing about consulting is that consultants create strategies. But if you zoom back, you realize that strategies just come from words. And words provoke ideas. Ideas give the ability for narrative. Narratives that you believe or do not believe can shape the strategies that are possible, given what you believe or do not believe. For example, if the word is black, and another word is boy, and the idea about that is criminality, then the narrative is danger. The strategy then is policing. Zoom it back. If the word is black and boy, and the idea that you have about that is joy and misunderstood, then the narrative you may consider about that is support and encouragement. And so the strategy becomes a well-funded system of public service, of private opportunities, and commitment. The only difference there is the idea you have about a narrative you'll believe to allow for strategies that affect people like me. I grew up in a time before people understood the words they were using about people like me. They didn't understand the power of those words and how those led to the types of outcomes. Not that I was provided that I grew up because of. For instance, I grew up in Chicago, but a lot of my success, I would not say is because of the city of Chicago. I would say it's actually in spite of the city of Chicago. The growth and the power that black people have in America right now, in many ways, some would say we should be proud, we should be encouraged, we should be happy to be in such a place as America. But I would offer up to those types of persons the idea that to endure a thing and to show yourself to be greater than what you face is not a mark of brilliance or benevolence or joy for those who inflict pain or ignore the infliction of it. It is actually simply the reminder of how powerful those who endure truly are. And so I look at my life and I look at this question of how do we create a city where black and brown people grow because of the city? rather than in spite of the city. Where our safety comes because of the city rather than in spite of the city. A city where I know that the words that we use are actually ones that are more humane rather than just human, about people who look like me. That's why I started Justice Informed, because I realized the power of strategy starts with the power of harnessing a word. And so I sought to change the face of expertise. I sat on boards for years and years. I worked in big jobs. First, small ones at a nonprofit in North Lawndale called the Young Men's Educational Network, just working life on life with young black men. Life on life. We went almost 15 years without ever losing a young man to gun violence, and then we started losing them over and over and over again. And I realized that the pain, the problem, and the solutions were all coming from upstream. And I left that job and I went into a role at the United Way of Metro Chicago and oversaw the economic development and workforce strategy for that organization. I had a $4 million portfolio and served as essentially a program officer, giving away philanthropic grants, but also creating and directing different types of ideas for strategies to drive jobs in the black and brown south and west sides of Chicago and the contiguous 5 counties around Cook. That wasn't upstream enough. Things were still coming from higher up. I realized that where these ideas actually started was in places that create ideas inside universities, where authorship is authorized, where to even get a doctorate, you have to produce knowledge that none of us have considered before. You have to go into nuance. And so I took a job at the University of Chicago as a senior assistant director for social innovation and philanthropy. They asked me, Xavier, how do we bridge this distance between the government sector and its programs, the private sector and its programs, and the nonprofit sector and its programs? But in between that, and this is actually when I became a 40 under 40 game changer with WVON, several nights after I got that award in 2014, I went off to Ferguson, Missouri. Mike Brown had just been killed. And all these things around words and skin and ideas and narratives and strategies all came together on Florissant and Canfield, just outside of St. Louis. And for the first time, I realized that just going upstream wasn't enough. I actually had to change what I thought the idea of social change was, not just social impact. I had to change what I thought the tools were that were at my disposal. I never understood why people marched. I knew they marched. I never understood why people put their bodies on the street, why they did die-ins. I saw them do it, but I didn't understand why. I was committed to philanthropy. I was committed to giving back. I never thought about what it meant to live a life where you didn't take first. I didn't really think about what it meant not to just mentor, but to think about why we need mentors in the first place and to understand the core parts of our society that are actually breaking apart the family itself. I had to think differently, meaning I had to think radically. And if you think about the word radical, don't be afraid of it. What it essentially means, the etymology of the word simply means to the root, to go to the root of the thing. That's what I decided to do. But I did it at gunpoint, police officers' gunpoint. When in the dawn of the Black Lives Matter era, when we just started saying those 3 words that have now rocked the entire world, Black Lives Matter. All my big jobs didn't matter, staring down the barrel of a police gun that had all of our tax dollars agreeing to say those 3 words was worth this response. And that's when I realized all the stuff I was doing wasn't really, what could it do for that? I remember just thinking that, like, what of what I'm doing can stop that specifically? And I couldn't come up with a good answer. So I started listening to different types of people. I stopped hanging out with philanthropists. I stopped going to gala events. I didn't go to downtown as much as I used to. In fact, we launched a campaign and shut down the Mag Mile at one point. I learned that the way that I thought community could and should be built was actually one that came out of the practices and the expectations that had not yet been decolonized, had not been stripped of their vestiges of white supremacy, had not been analyzed for how deeply embedded the work of capitalism and hyper-capitalism were involved in them. I learned that I had simply inherited a worldview and had been doing work to extend from it. I was radicalized. I went into the University of Chicago and I couldn't see my work the same. I didn't see the black and brown students the same. My job was to create projects that, bridge the divide between public and private. But my heart was sitting there knowing that until we actually dig deep and understand the underlying words that drive ideas, that drive narratives, that allow for strategies in the government, in the corporations, and in the nonprofits, we're never going to get to that root cause, that radical moment where things change. I stopped being a reformer, and I started thinking about what it meant to be a revolutionary. Ultimately, as you all can see, I've gone back into the corporate sector. I've started a company that is all about words. We want to change the words. We want to change what they mean in your mind when you hear them. We want to change the ideas that come to your mind when you hear the words about us. We want to change the narrative that you believe or don't believe when you hear the words and the ideas about us. And we want to shape, author, and authorize the strategies that affect us. At the core, my hope is that every single company on earth, every single person that wakes up every morning wondering, what is this breath for, thinks about the question, what would happen if profit wasn't what informed us? What would happen if just waking up and getting by wasn't what informed me? What if my report that I have due next week wasn't what informed me? What if fear didn't inform me? What if my own ambitions didn't inform me? What if marketing didn't inform me? What if law didn't inform me? What would happen if justice informed me? What would happen if I engaged in a more specific and accountable relationship with people perhaps I've never even met, but who I am affected and affecting? What if I believed what Dr. King said when he said we are all caught in an inescapable network of mutuality? What if I actually believed that? What if I didn't think about being selfless as losing something? What if I actually thought about it as the response to this preponderance of people and ideas that are all locating around this value of independence rather than the opportunities that happen when we are interdependent, when we are connected to one another, when we are responsive to one another, when we are responsible for one another? That's what gets me up in the morning. That's what gets me up. That's what keeps me up. That's why I put in 15, 16, 17 hours a day. That's why I'll do a contract for $215 and I will scale a company to 1 million. And I promise you in the next 5 years, you will see a small army of black and brown, of LGBTQ, of women consultants going out into the world, back into our neighborhoods, with strategies that come from different narratives, that come from different ideas, that comes from words that we created, because they were always about us. My name is Xavier Ramey. Thank you.